I should tell you that I was born and raised in Indiana, and that has significant bearing on what I'm going to say tonight because of some of the experiences that I had there and that we're going to talk about. I went to Purdue University in West Lafayette for an undergraduate degree in wildlife conservation. And when I was there, I took an entomology course. So I have some background in entomology, but I must admit, this is the first time I've ever talked about insects in any kind of a forum. But I think you can be certain that what I'm telling you is going to be reasonably accurate. And then I went to University of Montana for a master's degree. And then from there, I went to UCLA, where I studied seabirds for a PhD. And then I went to the University of Washington, where I was on the faculty for a long time, 40 some years. And during that time also, I did spend some time at the University of Montana on the faculty, 1 year, and then actually teaching there and doing some research, and then went back again as a visiting faculty member in 2008. So I have some experience there. When I was an undergraduate at Purdue, I spent 2 summers at the Delta Waterfowl Research Station in Manitoba. And when I was there, I found a lot of insects, a lot of mosquitoes. There were lots of different kinds of flies that were associated with that great marsh they have there. And so insects were kind of a prominent thing there. So anyway, during my time doing research, I've done that in Montana and Washington, California, Alaska, British Columbia. And so it's been a pretty varied experience, and I've enjoyed all the stuff that I've been able to do. One of the things that I noticed when I was in Indiana and growing up there is, and I didn't know that this was unusual, is that the nighttime was noisy. Any of you from the Midwest or the South or the East know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Nights,
Yes.
yeah, were noisy, and I really enjoyed that actually. And then when I came out to Montana and Washington, even California to some degree, it was dead. And the nights were really quiet. I said, wow, this is really different. And tonight I'm going to tell you why that might be the case. Okay, now we're going to talk about a very strange sexual cycle. It's called a 17-year itch. And this deals with the Brood X or Brood 10 cicada of 2021. Now, when people talk about these huge emergences, they talk about locusts. Well, they're not locusts, they're cicadas. And let me show you the difference between a locust and a cicada. Now, this is the general of these animals. Of course, they're animals. They belong to the phylum Arthropoda in the class Insecta. And there are 2 orders that separate them. The order that contains the cicadas called Hemiptera, and these are also known as the true bugs. Then there are 2 families, the Cicadidae, which are the cicadas. There's 3,200 species in the world, so it's a pretty good family. A second smaller family there. And then the Orthoptera are the locusts. And these are animals, insects that you're familiar with, the grasshoppers, the katydids, and the crickets. So those are kind of lumped into the group called locusts. I didn't know that actually until I did this. In another simple classification here in a comparison, the 2 different orders, Orthoptera containing the locusts, they tend to be larger than the other group of insects. and they appear to have longer bodies, larger rear wings, and much longer hind legs. And you can see down here at the bottom, you got the grasshoppers on the left here, the katydids here in the middle, and the crickets. And over here on this side are the cicadas. So they do look quite different in their general body shape. Now let's compare Indiana and Montana. Now, another reason I want to talk about Indiana is that this summer I had the pleasure of traveling to Indiana to see some relatives. But I traveled with my wife, my son John, and my daughter Joy, who both of whom are watching this presentation right now. And it was kind of nice to have our family back together again on this trip to see these relatives of ours. Now, the first thing you see here is that there are a heck of a lot more cicadas in Indiana than there are in Montana. There are 19 species in Indiana, and I think Indiana is probably representative of much of the eastern United States where cicadas occur. And Montana only has 5 species. There is, oddly enough, one species, the Say's cicada, that is found in both places. That was a bit unusual. Now, of the 19 species of cicadas in Indiana, 4 of them have 13-year cycles, and 3 of them have 17-year cycles. Now, the one I'm going to talk about today is one of the 3 17-year cycle cicadas. Now, all the 12 species that are not periodic, all are they disappear each year. These are Montana cicadas. There are 3 that belong to this one genus here, Megatibecen, and 2 in the Okanagan genus. So those are the 5 that we have here. I think they are actually very attractive animals. Some people think they're ugly. I don't happen to be one of them. I like the looks of these things. They are totally harmless, unless you own a lot of vegetation, then they might eat some of your vegetation. Now, these things are come only 6 times in a century. And these are the last emergences since 1902. I happened to witness the one in 1953, and I was not in Indiana during the times of the emergences of these other ones, except 2021. So 6 times in 1 century, these things emerge. Now, just think about that just for a minute. This is an animal that reproduces once every 17 years. And when it emerges, it's only alive for 2 weeks. Now that is one bizarre breeding cycle. Now this is a map that shows the 2 periodic cicadas, the 17-year cicadas, the ones in this first group here, and then the 13-year down below. Now the ones that we observed this year is in yellow. So we were in Indiana, which is kind of the center of the major emergence that occurred this year. And there's another group out here in Pennsylvania and other parts of the east here, but not many. And there's a little bit down here in Carolinas and Tennessee. So it's fairly small distribution. Now, this is a little bit alarming, at least from my perspective. Now, you see this light brown color here. This is the known original historic range of this Brood X cicada. The red is what emerged this year. And even in here, it wasn't quite as dramatic and as extensive as you see on the screen. So something has happened to the range of the cicada. And my guess is it's habitat destruction, a loss of forest habitat, because they are primarily animals of the forest. So there's a contraction of their habitat. So the life cycle, as I mentioned earlier, is a little bit bizarre. Take a look here on the left side. We'll start with the adult in this one. The adults emerge and they lay eggs on vegetation, usually the branches of trees or shrubs. The eggs hatch over a few days and they emerge into these nymphs. Now, these nymphs, if you look at the diagrams here, they have legs, they have 6 legs like insects do, and they have mouth parts. And during the time that they're nymphs, they actually eat vegetation. And they eventually metamorphose into a larger nymph and they go underground and then they emerge. If you go on the left side here, let's start off with the on the left side here. It says the first instar. This particular species goes through 5 developmental stages when it's a young one. So it goes the first nymph, second, third, fourth, and the 5th is the one that emerges from the ground. It goes through this process called ecdysis, which is a transformation from the nymph stage to an adult, and is an adult for 14 days. During mating and egg laying, which takes about 24 hours, the females lay the eggs on the vegetation, and the eggs hatch after about 2 months, and then the whole thing starts over again. These eggs hatch and the nymphs go back into the ground and spend 17 years underground. And during that time, they eat the roots of trees and shrubs during that 17 years. This is kind of the same sort of thing, a little bit more detail. It talks about the adults up here. They have the courtship phase. And during that courtship, the males go through, they sing. Well, they're not singing in the normal sense of the word, but they flick their wings and they make this incredible noise. And each species produces a different sound. And so you can usually tell the different species by the kind of sound they make. But they are very noisy when there are these big emergences. So females lay the eggs. You see the eggs depicted here on the branch. And each of these females lay about 20 eggs. She ultimately may lay up to 600, depending on the situation that she finds herself in. And adults live 3 to 4 weeks. And then they spend 6 to 8 weeks later, they hatch, and then they fall to the ground, and then they eventually burrow in the ground. And then they spend all that 13 to 17 years, depending whether it's a 13-year cycle or 17-year cycle. They spend all that time underground feeding and eventually emerge, and then they come out of the ground. That's a heck of a long cycle. This is a picture of the holes in the ground that we found in Indiana this June. At first, those holes, but then it dawned on me after I looked at the ground more carefully that these are holes that were formed from these emerging nymphs. If you look carefully, there's a nymph right there, here, here, here. Yeah, let's see. Here's one here. Can't see too many more. Here's a bunch of nymphs on the ground here. But those are the holes that they come out of during the emergence. Here's some feeding nymphs feeding on an oak case. And a lot of the material that they feed on is actually dead plant material. This keeps them alive until they transform into the adult. Now, these are all the body cases of the nymphs, the fifth instar, that have, if you look carefully, like at this one right here, where you see the cursor, and over here, see an opening in the body of these nymphs. And right here, this lighter colored one is actually an adult emerging from the nymph case. And here's one over here as well. So in a big emergence, you'll see the ground littered with hundreds, if not thousands, of these nymphs. And here's a pristine adult. Now this particular cicada has been out of the ground and emerged probably within a day, and it's absolutely perfect in its form. You probably can't hear anything here. My daughter, Joy, took this video and recorded the sound. I don't think it's going to work here, but if you go online and go on, find the Brood X Cicada sounds, you can hear recordings of these things, and it's pretty impressive. In our case, it sounds like a large amount of traffic on a freeway, and it wasn't. These were the sounds of the cicada. So they can be really noisy. Okay.
Dave, can you click on that slide at the bottom? Yeah, there.
Oh, there it is. I don't know if you hear birds in the background, but it just sounds like static. That's what a typical forest environment for these guys looks like. Okay. Okay, now these guys have predators, as you can imagine, but they aren't very significant. But these are the typical birds that were observed by us as well as other people that eat cicadas after they emerge. I suppose they could eat some in the nymph stage as well. Medium-sized birds like robins, blue jays, scarlet tanagers, crows, and of course there are mammals as well, fox squirrels, gray squirrels, eastern chipmunks, and of course house cats. And there are lots of other things as well. These are just some examples. And the primary defense of the cicada, especially these periodical ones, is they simply overwhelm the predators by their numbers. There's just so many of them that the predators take a small, very, very small percentage of them. And it doesn't really have much effect at all on the population. Of course, humans have taken advantage of this. They make these T-shirts and things like this that advertise the emergence of a particular cicada. I got one on, I'll show you later on. But I succumbed to this and bought a Brood X T-shirt. And of course, there is cicada pizza from Dayton, Ohio. So if you ever think about having a cicada pizza, that's the place to go. I personally couldn't think of eating one of these things. Other predators would include fish. Of course, these cicadas fall in the water, and then they're subjected to predation by things like this bluegill here and rock bass. And then on land, you got lots of snakes eat them. garter snake, a great blue heron that's obviously not in its normal habitat, that's eating cicadas on the ground. Here's a nice bunch of cicadas. If you get into an emergence like this, it's very common to find places in the foliage where you have just large numbers of these animals on the leaves. And they will eat live vegetation during the short time that they're alive. Now, the next emergence will be in 2038 of this particular species. So it goes quite a long time. There is more. Last Friday, September 9th, I took my 12-week-old black Labrador retriever out for her final pee of the day, I hoped, and heard something making a noise. And it turns out it was a bush cicada. One of the 5 species of cicadas we have in Montana was calling right outside of our garage. So that was kind of a treat. Then on Sunday, this thing appeared on our sliding glass door. And that turned out to be fork-tailed bush katydid. I had never seen a katydid in Montana before. And this guy just happened to appear on our deck. And it was a pretty interesting animal. Took a while to figure out what it was. And that's all, folks. Any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation. That was great.
Here, let me show you this before too far. See, there it is.
Oh, look at that.
Brood X cicada.
That's awesome.
Have you eaten cicadas, Dave?
No, I did not do that. I had a relative give me a chocolate covered grasshopper once, and that cured me of eating those kinds of insects.
So
By the way,
those katydids in the cicadas in Montana,
Yes.
even though they emerge every year, they have a similar lifestyle, just
yeah, they have
shorter,
a
right?
very similar life cycle. There just aren't that many of them. But my guess is that you'd probably have to go to riparian areas or places where there's a lot of deciduous trees and shrubs to find these guys. I think that's why there are so many in the Eastern United States, because the dominant vegetation there is deciduous. I think that's their primary food. Yeah, I grew up with cicadas, and I heard them every summer. But when the big one occurred in 1953, and of course this last year, wow, it was a big difference. They were everywhere.
In West Valley here, we've heard them in the past. This year, my hearing's getting worse and worse, but we used to hear them a lot here in the summertime,
No,
but not many of them. But I was able to recognize them because originally we were from Missouri, and there's a lot of them.
Oh,
in
yeah.
Missouri.
yeah,
So,
I don't know what's going on. Could be changes in the habitat. Do you guys hear them down at Denny? Do you hear them at the Owen Sourwine area?
I haven't yet, no. I was just.
That might be a good place to try.
Yeah, I was hunting, yeah, because it's pretty deciduous down there with the
Right.
cottonwoods. I just wondered if they taste like chicken. That's all I was.
Anyway, it was a fascinating study into the biology of these things is, it's so bizarre to have a life cycle in which you emerge for a couple weeks every 17 years. Now, that's a weird thing, I think, or 13 years.
One of the things that I noticed, just thought of this, the noise that they were making was a continuous buzz.
Yeah, that's right.
And then finally I found them, I could see the actual insect. So,
Oh,
but it
that's
was
good.
not a up and down sound. It was just a continuous buzz.
Yeah, that's right. That's, I think all of them do that, but the buzzing quality varies considerably among the different species. And the one that I heard at our place was that way. Oh, by the way, the first night that I heard it, Friday, was warmer than Saturday night. And the guy tonight I felt like he was really having trouble getting this thing going. The cold air just made him do it. He just sputtered and blah, 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 it just couldn't go. He was there though. Only one cicada, as far as I can.
My big experience with cicadas was riding a motorcycle back through through and I didn't hit any, thank goodness.
Oh,
But I was camping in some town in South Dakota, and I was camping at a city campground, and there were thousands of them, and they were screaming all night long, this high-pitched whine, and I couldn't get to sleep. It was just so loud. It was deafening. And
yeah, it's pretty spectacular.
yeah, it was pretty amazing.
The people who live back there have to live with it. After a while, you just get used to it, but get accustomed to.
Hey, Dave, couple questions. One of them is, is the sound made by rubbing their wings?
Dave,
do you know anything about that mechanism? And then the
No,
second thing is speaking of their wings, do they fly very much, if at all?
they fly. They're not very good at it, but they do fly around. When we went into the forested areas that we were checking, where we found them, we did see them flying around, but most of what we saw were cicadas that were on the bark of trees or on the branches or on the leaves of vegetation. But they do fly, but I wouldn't, they're not very good at it. It seemed like with those wings, they do pretty well. I don't think they're known for their flying.
And then also, do you know anything about how they generate sound? Is that a vibration, like with their wings, or is that some other mechanism? Do you know?
You know, I need to check that out. I think it is their wings, but there's some other things that I don't know whether it's anything about katydids or cicadas, that there's something on their body.
It has something to do with their wings, and they rub it against their body, when they're making the noise.
Yeah.
Back in Missouri, in the St. Louis area, we had an emergence of 17-year locusts, and they were a little smaller than a regular large green. I didn't know the different species, or I couldn't identify them, but they had red eyes, a little bit smaller than the big green ones we had.
Oh,
And there were jillions of them. I mean, they drove us crazy. We couldn't get away from the sound, it was just.
They've been known to cause accidents on highways. So many of them emerge and they get squished on the road, and pretty soon we've got some problems with greasy road service.
Dave, did you see Gail's question about does bird reproduction increase in big cicada years? Did you happen to read anything about that?
I've not read anything to that effect. It would be pretty short duration. And the emergence in Indiana this year, at least, and probably most years, was probably after the birds have already started laying eggs. So unless they double clutch or triple clutch, it wouldn't do them any good. What it might do though is increase the survivorship of the young. Because
Yeah, I was thinking bringing cicadas back, pieces of them anyway, back to the nestlings. Yeah,
yeah, but I've not seen any
Yeah.
studies that actually indicate that.
okay. Interesting.
Well, I'm glad I could bug you guys a little while. I'll see
Very
you in
good.
November. I'm going to give another presentation in November, but it'll be quite different than what you will have seen by then. So I'll let you look at the schedule.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Dave.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Dave.
Appreciate it.
Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.